Welcome to Untangled Vines, redefining the rules of work. Today, we're thrilled to introduce a dynamic leader and an inspiration in the world of leadership and organizational culture. Karin Hurt, author of Courageous Cultures. Karin is a true catalyst for courage, confidence, and innovation. With a rich background as a former executive at Verizon Wireless, she's earned a reputation for nurturing courageous leaders, cultivating exceptional workplaces and cultures, and igniting high performance teams. But Karin doesn't just talk the talk. She's a four-time award-winning author, and her book, Courageous Cultures, written with co-author David Dye, has been making waves in the world of leadership. Her insightful perspectives have earned her recognition as an Inc. Great Leadership Speaker, thanks to her highly interactive keynotes, as you'll see in this episode, and executive programs that leave audiences inspired and ready for action. Beyond the written word, Karin actively inspires and guides leaders through her leadership development programs, a thought-provoking weekly blog, and engaging Asking for a Friend show on LinkedIn. Her mission is clear: to empower leaders with the knowledge, skills, and insights they need to lead courageously and foster cultures of excellence. So, get ready to experience the world of leadership, wisdom, and courageous cultures as we sit down with Karin. This is an episode you won't want to miss on Untangled Vines, so let's go ahead and get to it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Untangled Vines. Today we have a special guest, Karin Hurt. I first came across Karin whenever I was reading her and David's book, Courageous Cultures, and I made a post on LinkedIn and she actually reached out to me. So that's how we're here today. And I'm very excited about this because I love the book and I want to share it with everybody. So Karin, thanks for being a part of our community and this podcast episode.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I like to just dive into it instead of trying to do the fluff stuff. But I wanted to start by asking you, what made you get into this industry of growing leaders and helping companies cultivate courageous cultures?
So I was at Verizon for 20 years before founding Let's Grow Leaders, and I had a variety of roles there. I started in human resources. I did everything in human resources except comp. And then I moved into operations. I led a 2,200 person sales team, a 10,000 person customer service organization. And in my final role at Verizon, I was asked to transform what they were calling the vendor management organization at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all the outsourced call centers that were taking Verizon's calls. And they had ramped up all these call centers really, really quickly because Verizon had first started selling the iPhone. Because believe it or not, once upon a time, Verizon could not sell the iPhone. AT&T had exclusive rights. Well, you don't have to be in the customer service world to know that you can't ramp up a bunch of call centers basically overnight and have a quality customer experience. So we were having real challenges, and they knew that I was an expert in culture and transformation and had done a lot of turnarounds with teams over the years. So they pulled me out of my sales role and said, could you come transform, figure out like which of these call centers we need to shut down, which of these companies are worth working with. Now that sounds like a terrible job for somebody as a human-centered leader, right? Oh, let's go see who we're going to fire. So I said, how about this? What if our job is going to be to work with these companies to transform their cultures so that they are at parity with internal centers? Basically, they're providing the best, same customer experience no matter who takes the call. And they're like, well, yeah, you can do that, sure. So it was a 3-year effort, working very closely with all these different organizations to really break down what is culture. Like, how do you build a great culture when you can hardly take the people off the phone, when you're operating at very low margins and you don't have the luxury of working for a Fortune 15 company. And it was very interesting. After a career of having a lot of resources and people and tools available, I was like, how do you simplify it? And so we did. And one of the things that I was very adamant about is we were going to do this in a very human-centered way, a human-centered, practical way. And so as I was going in and out of these companies, one of the things I started to do was write a blog
Mm.
because I was, learning and processing and making this blog available to the supervisors in these organizations. Well, the blog took off. It got an international following. I started getting all these questions. When are you going to write your book? Can you be our keynote speaker? Can you come transform our organization like you helped those guys do? And of course, I had this big job. I couldn't do that. And then one of the VPs, his name was Don Yeager, at one of these centers said to me, Karen, I am on the board of the International Customer Service Association. Would you just come and be our keynote speaker? And I'm like, all right, that sounds fun. I'm like, I mean, I'm not a keynote speaker. He said, yeah, but just go tell them the story. So I did get off the stage, and the guy who was coming up next was a professional keynote speaker. And he said to me, Karen, when are you leaving Verizon? And I said, wait, what? Did I say that from the stage? Because I was super nervous.
Yeah.
He says, no, you are definitely supposed to be doing this with your life. Hands me his card. He says, I am the president of the National Speakers Association. When you're ready to do this, let me know.
Ooh.
And so I went home and I'm like, flying back that the universe is trying to tell me something, right? And gosh, that could be a lot of fun. Do I have the courage to do it? And so I did. And I gave Verizon 4 months notice. Everything would stay moving. And I started Let's Grow Leaders and really haven't looked back. So that's the origin of how I got involved in growing leaders.
I love that story because a lot of times I feel like when somebody's pushed into doing something by the universe, it means, like you said, you're supposed to be doing this. So it's out of straight passion, which I think the best founders and companies are created and founded off of passion. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it that but that's an awesome story, and we might have to link up. I want to do some keynotes eventually. We'll see. But there's a few things that I want to talk to you about today, specifically in your book, Courageous Cultures. And so I know that in the book you talk about clarity and the curiosity loop. You talk about the idea framework, owning the ugly, and then galvanizing the genius. And so I want to kind of go in that order, if
Okay.
you're okay with that.
Sure.
And so let's start with clarity and curiosity. Can you explain the loop and talk about the importance of these elements in organizations, especially because Grapevine focuses on hybrid and remote organizations. So can you tell us how important that is, especially in remote and hybrid organizations?
Yeah, so it was interesting. What we were noticing, I didn't fully answer your question about why courageous culture. So let me start there to get to why the clarity and curiosity piece. We were noticing as we were working with organizations all over the world, a consistent pattern. And executives would say to us, hey, you know what? I'm so frustrated. Like my team they're not bringing forward best practices. They're operating around like, they're just doing what we tell them to do. And I go in to do a skip level visit and I understand there's all this great stuff that nobody's talking about. Why aren't people raising their hand with their ideas? And then we would do work in the same organizations at the front line and people would say, nobody wants my ideas. Last time I spoke up, I got in trouble. Nothing ever happens anyway. So why bother? So that's what really sparked our research into psychological safety and innovation, and specifically micro innovation. And where does all that come from? And, we could talk about some of the findings of that research, but to answer your question, really we found that there were a couple of steps that to do this well really mattered. And the first was this creating clarity. And this is clarity about two things. Clarity that you really do want people's ideas. And that's more than, oh, I have an open door. It's real. And then it's clarity about what a good idea would actually accomplish. Because one of the other things that we've really noticed is when managers come to us and say, you know what, my team is just not that good. They're not strategic enough. They're not critical thinkers. Usually they do not have enough context. They don't know enough of what you know to be able to think like you think. And so it's this clarity times psychological safety that leads to innovation. Because if you provide a lot of clarity of, here's where we're if you provide a lot of psychological safety with that clarity, people will speak up and they'll share their ideas, but they're probably a lot of wacky ideas that you're not going to be able to use. But if you can be
Hmm.
very clear about what a good idea would accomplish and make it easy for people to speak up, then they are sharing their ideas. So that's really where it starts. So
Hmm.
every program we do, we really talk to, do people understand your most important things, your most important strategic priorities? Have you communicated them consistently? Have you checked for understanding to make sure people are picking up what you're putting down? Have you scheduled time to talk about this? So all of that clarity stuff is really the foundation for any kind of innovation.
Hmm.
And then it's the curiosity, which is not just saying, "Hey, I have an open door. If you have any ideas, bring them by." It's really going out and asking very specific questions. We found that the more specific you can be, the better. So, what's one way we could improve the productivity of this process? What's one way we could continue to nurture collaboration with everybody working from home? When you can be
Hmm.
that specific with what we call a courageous question, that's specific and it's humble, it assumes that improvement is possible. That is what creates this innovation. And
Hmm.
we say it's an elegant dance of clarity and curiosity, because it's not clarity or curiosity. You need both, and you need to know when to activate which. And one of the things is, we'll go in and to work with you and your team, we would say we would start where you are. Like, so one of our big clients is Nestle,
Hmm.
and they've asked us to build a care and dare culture. And that's a courageous culture, right? It's caring and daring, right? Innovation. And Nestle has a huge track record of real, real clarity. You must have real clarity if you are going to have be putting food into people's
Yeah.
baby formula, right? So you can't innovate on a lot of things. You have to
Hmm.
follow the rules. The safety is the most important thing. But they've said, but we still need innovation. We still need, how do we increase productivity? How do we do new product lines? So they're like, we got the clarity piece. We need to keep that. Now, how do we also be very clear about where we need ideas and then get people comfortable that it is okay to try some new things?
Hmm. Yeah, and so the thing with me is, in the previous experiences that I've had working for companies, I always find that they either start off with clarity and then it kind of fades away over time, or um, they're like, the leaders at the executive level are a little bit standoffish about giving all the information to the frontline workers. Have you experienced that, and how do you navigate that with a courageous culture?
Yeah, so when it comes to clarity, I do see that too. People think they've communicated because they've communicated it once.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to a CEO and they'll say, "I don't understand why people don't get it. We brought everybody, we had an in-person, face-to-face meeting for 3 days, and we talked about our strategy in January. And now it's April."
Yep.
Right? And that's communicating once. And so if something is really important, we talk about how 5 by 5 communication, that you want to
Hmm.
communicate it 5 times, 5 different ways. So yeah, great. You brought everybody together. That's great. Energizing.
Hmm.
And assuming you did that well, that's way one. Even if you talked about it multiple times in that meeting, that's way one. Then maybe you follow up with an internal podcast, or you follow up with an important memo. Maybe you follow it up with um, giving a toolkit to every manager to be able to go back and do it with their
Yeah.
teams. You have a recognition program around the things that you're doing. Maybe you do something even silly to really break distraction, and record executive doing a video. But what matters most is that it's you do things that repeat over time, that you are checking to see whether the messages that you're sending are the messages that are receiving.
Hmm.
And you do things to break preoccupation. Sending 5 emails is not that more effective than sending one email, because people are like, "I already
Yeah.
got that memo." So you,
Exactly.
just like in any kind of a marketing message, that's why you see people using multiple mediums. So that's the one thing. One thing I would say about clarity. The other piece that you mentioned is, I'm afraid to give people too much information, right? And I mean, you have to decide your right level of transparency
Hmm.
and your reasons for it. I would say the same thing, just like I would advise parents when I talk to parents about leadership, is people can handle more than you think.
Yeah.
And if you are hiding something, or you're manipulating something, or you're leaving out information, we call this ditching the diaper genie. As if you are not telling somebody, like if you take a stinky diaper and you put it in the genie and give it a twist and the plastic wraps around it really tight, the
Hmm.
poop is still there and the stink is still there. And if you go to your team and say, nothing is changing, nothing, just keep focusing on your job, everything is just fine. And then turning on their TV and there's stuff about your company in the news, or or they're watching people get laid off right and left, and you're not explaining all that, then they're going to make up the worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I was gonna jump in for a second, because that's what typically happens is the less transparent you are, the more rumors that happen from people who don't know what you didn't want them to know when they should know it. That might have been meta, but
Yeah.
that's my experience. I used to before I got into tech and business, I used to actually work in the operating room, and we had this culture of a lot of people having rumors, or the top just never communicated to us. We got to the point where we were able to get the president of the hospital into one room with all of us, and nobody was speaking up at that time. Speaking about courageous cultures, I think they had the opposite. And so I was an operating room assistant, which means I like clean up after the surgeries. That's where I started. And I raised my hand and asked a question to the president, and I said, because we kept talking about turnover, there was a lot of turnover, and I said, like, we keep talking about turnover. What are we going to do for the people who are still here? And she didn't have an answer to give to me. But after that, just me speaking up, there were so many people in the OR that came up to me and said, thank you for speaking up. And I think it's because they were scared to speak up. So that transparency to me is actually building trust, and it leads into having that courageous culture. So I just wanted to jump in there before continuing.
I mean, that's a great story. And here's the interesting thing about that, because one of the things that we'll do when we go out and like do a keynote or something, we'll ask people, what is one moment of courage? A moment that you had of courage. And just like your story, how did you feel after you spoke up and you were listened to?
I felt really good.
You felt really good. And actually, as it turns out, I mean, that was good. It didn't take a ton of courage, right? Like, I mean, nobody was shooting at you. And
Yeah.
so, that's the thing. Like most moments of courage, the things that make people feel really good, is when I'm like, I was a little bit scared. I spoke up. I did it anyway, and the outcome was good. And but yet, look at all those other people who were talking themselves out of saying
Yeah.
and thanking you for doing it. And so that's why we have to really work hard to make it safe. Now, if they had not responded with regard, right, which
Hmm.
because you read the book, if they had, said, "Thank you, no, 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 thanks, we don't really need your opinion around here," right?
Hmm.
Well, you're not going to speak up the next time.
Yeah. And it carry, like you mentioned in the book, it carries over
Yeah,
into the next culture, into your next position, and
yeah.
you keep getting bogged down. Yeah.
Yeah. 40% of the people in our courageous cultures research said that they lack the confidence to share their ideas. And we dug into that with the qualitative research behind it. A lot of it was people that had a negative experience speaking up in the past. And
Hmm.
a lot of the time, it wasn't even at that same company or with that supervisor, but they were bringing it forward
Hmm.
into their current role.
Which kind of brings up another question, maybe, or just a call out is, I don't like using PTSD for non-certain things, but in this situation, it kind of is like PTSD. So some leaders are kind of set up for failure unless they're very intentional. Meaning, if a new employee comes over to from an experience like you were mentioning where they spoke up and got shot down, now it's kind of on the leader in a sense to build that culture, or showcase like that culture, or one, learn that happened, to get them to understand that culture isn't this culture, and then show and guide them how most people speak up here. Do you guys help? I mean, I'm assuming you do, but do you guys help leaders coach other people on how to speak up. I know you say fear of speaking up. Is that right?
Yeah, FOSU.
Yeah, yeah.
Not FOSU, fear is speaking up. Yeah, and so there's a couple of ways. First, you got the leaders who need to make it easier, and then you've got to teach the people, whether they're managers or not managers, because I still see a lot of managers who are afraid to speak up. People who are
Mm,
people managers are afraid to speak up. And
hmm
so how do you navigate that? One is we have a very simple technique that we teach, and I just was at a working with a large governmental agency. And the government is historically known for being more bureaucratic, right?
hmm
And this particular agency had a lot of those same issues historically, very top down management,
hmm
and they wanted to build a courageous culture. And they saw the reasons for it and the need for innovation, because technology is changing, and where they're in is not going to be the same 5 years from now, and they need to bring people along. And so one of the things that we did was taught everyone in the room the idea model,
hmm
which is if you have an idea, to speak up, start with why is it interesting? Meaning, why is it strategically aligned with where you need an idea? So
hmm
the other day, my senior in high school son came into my office, and he like peeked in to make sure I wasn't on a
Yeah.
podcast interview. And then he's like, Mama, I have an idea that could make me go to college for free.
Mm.
All right. Now, I don't know whether this idea will work or not, but that's the kind of idea that if I am distracted, I am like putting down my phone, because I would like to hear that idea. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing. So I have an idea that will improve our morale on our team, will improve productivity, will enhance this customer experience, will retain employees, right? Will make life easier in some way for our customers, our employees, our shareholders.
hmm
That say it in one sentence. And when we actually role play this with people, it's so hard for people to do this. So I want to make sure your listeners get this. It's not like, what, I've been really thinking about this issue for a really long time. I've talked to a bunch of people, I did some research, no, tell me in your first sentence why I should listen to you. So that's
hmm
interesting. D, doable. This is why that you explain that, yeah, we could pull this off. This is not going to need a change in administration. This is not going to need $1 million. Here's why I think this will work.
hmm
And you don't have to have thought it all through, but just show that you have some semblance of why it's doable. E, engaging. Here's where you can mention if you've stakeholdered it with anybody else. I've already talked with HR. I've already talked with my
hmm
coworkers, and they think it's a great idea. And then actions. What are a couple of your first recommended actions or next steps? Now, if you go to your boss and you say, hey, I have an idea. Here's why it's interesting, doable, engaging actions. Even if they can't implement it, you are still coming across as a critical thinker who
hmm
cares a lot about the organization, who is articulate, right? And you got nothing to fear.
Exactly. Yeah, because you're coming to the table, you turn ideas into a strategy, so to speak, where the planning goes in before, and then whenever you're taking it to your manager or whoever you're trying to convince, now it shows them one, like you said, you get straight to the point. So they already know what it is that you're trying to do. And then you bring these other elements to it. Now it's like, okay, this is not only the idea that I want to bring forward, but this is how I think we can achieve it and why it's important. So, yeah, as a manager or a previous manager, like that's what I would love to have from employees. There's one story. I'll try not to do so many stories because
That's
this is for you.
good.
But there was a newer employee, and I wanted to encourage him to be able to bring up ideas and share them and have the autonomy and responsibility to do it. But what I think I missed was this idea framework on teaching the employee how to approach it, because what happened was he took the initiative to vet out a vendor that we could possibly use to improve our sales engineering organization, and he did everything correctly except for one thing where he, in my opinion, you could correct me because I like having these types of debates. In my opinion, he scheduled a demo, but he included the CEO and like 4 C-level executives, and it was like before having a conversation with me, which I could have guided him a little bit different. So with that story, what is your takeaway on that? Let's break it down.
So that's how you've got to teach people the process. And in that case,
Mm,
he skipped over engaging.
mm,
And, blindsiding your boss is never a good idea.
yeah.
And even your human-centered boss, because as you're exactly like, all right, so I could have helped you prepare to answer the obvious questions that I knew that they would ask, or
Hmm.
right. And so the how is the process. And speaking up doesn't mean just everybody running around, and psychological safety, creating an environment of psychological safety doesn't mean that everybody running around and just saying whatever is on their mind with, right?
Hmm.
You still need to do that in a way that is going to build a positive culture. And if every single employee started just knocking on the CEO's door, right, that's not a good use of the CEO's time.
Hmm.
So you've got to build processes to make, when I have an idea, teach people, well, what do you do when you have an idea? Yeah, in fact, I really like that question. I think I'm going to do an asking for a friend show on that question. That's a good one.
You should. You should. Yeah, because I was able to coach him after the fact,
Yeah.
which I do think that a lot of leaders abdicate their responsibilities whenever it comes to tough conversations, which I want to ask you about later whenever we get to owning the ugly. But to stay on the idea framework, or maybe back up a little bit, who should own the approach of creating a courageous culture? And these elements that come with creating a
Yeah, I
courageous
mean,
culture.
ideally, who owns it? It starts at the top and it trickles all the way down, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not about like a CEO saying we're going to have a courageous culture, right? It's modeling the way. It's really taking psychological safety seriously. One of the things that we talk about is first you've got to eliminate toxic courage crushers like shame, blame, and
Mm.
intimidation. And because if you have any of that stuff going on, then people are not going to believe you when you say it's fine to speak up and share their ideas.
Yep.
And so you've got to, we always say, you got to read our first book, Winning Well, first. Winning Well is a manager's guide to getting results without losing your soul, because that's really the
Mm.
fundamentals of, being a good leader. That's got to be in place if you want any level of innovation. So
Hmm.
it would start at the top, but I don't want to leave your listeners discouraged, because my guess is you don't only have CEOs and COOs listening to your podcast.
Hmm.
And in the book we talk about creating a cultural oasis, and that's like where can you start?
Hmm.
Because that's one of the number one things. I'll do a keynote, and then there will be a line of people at the book signing, and I will tell you 10% of them every time, no matter where I am, 10% of them are saying, yeah, but it won't work in my company
Yep.
because of insert senior leader's name here, right?
Hmm.
And that's not true. I mean, because it can work for your part of the company. And you
Mm.
don't have to go make an announcement. You don't have to ask for permission. Just start with, where is one area that you really need a great idea? Be very clear that you want people's ideas. Make it safe for them to speak up by asking a courageous question or inviting them into the conversation, or even use some of the visible anonymity stuff we talk about in the book, like give
Hmm.
everybody an index card, or put everybody into the chat, have everybody send you a private chat that
Hmm.
gives you their very best idea. They can all know. You can say, all right, I got 7 private chats. There are 12 of you. I'm waiting. We're not moving on until we have 12 private chats. So that,
Hmm.
okay, I got 11. There's one more. So you're making it clear that people are participating, but it's safe, because not
Hmm.
everybody, you're not seeing what everybody's saying. Now, hopefully, you're creating a culture that you don't have to do it that way forever, because you want
Hmm.
to create a culture where people can speak up.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because, I run this show called Asking for a Friend. The idea being, it's easier to ask for a friend than ask for yourself.
Yep.
And and I'll hand out cards. So if I'm doing a day-long workshop, I'll hand out Asking for a Friend cards. Well, all day long I'm taking questions, like raise
Hmm.
your hand, taking questions. But the really juicy questions are the ones that come in that people are afraid to raise their hand and say. So
Yeah.
we've got to make it some way that people feel like they can ask those real, like what if my boss is not on board? So if you can do that and create a cultural oasis, and if you do it well, I guarantee you your results are going to get better.
Yeah.
Right. And then when your results are getting better, then that's when the executives are going to come to you and say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then you're like, you know what? I'm involving people. I'm asking for their ideas and I'm implementing. Oh, huh. Can you come teach that to other people? And this is not theory. First of all, I mean, so you've read the book, in chapter 6, I talk about a massive turnaround with our 2,200 person sales team. And I wasn't calling it courageous cultures at that time, but I was getting people's ideas and using those ideas and spreading those ideas. And, we won the President's Award for customer growth. And I got to tell you, my peers from other regions they were like flying in to come to our stores to watch. What the heck are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. Is as you were explaining that, you start where you're at, and when you start to see that, or when other people start to see it, because you'll start to see it before they do. But then when other people start seeing that your department and your culture is one more productive, then they look into like the how, and then they come across the courageous culture acts. So no, that like I've always tried to build a culture of openness, and maybe sometimes I'm too transparent, but I've, like you said, most people can handle more than you think they can. And I've never had an issue with explaining or tapping into the details of something going on in the company or how we're thinking about it. One of the ways that I go about it is I'll start addressing something that could happen. And so like we might be on the leadership team and we're discussing something that we're thinking about. Now I won't do it right at the beginning, but I'll start it whenever there's a part where it's like, okay, we're almost ready to launch this. And I'll kind of prepare my employees. And I don't even like saying my employees. I say like partners. But like I'll start to prepare them and say like, this is going to be coming down the chute. And so we don't need to do anything now, but I just want you to be prepared for whenever this rolls out so you aren't blindsided. And what that helps me do with them is kind of get them thinking before we actually roll something out. So I don't know if that's a similar thing, but it kind of blended the way that you're talking there.
Yeah. I mean, you're creating clarity about the strategy. People can see the roadmap. And then if they have ideas or concerns, they can tell you. They're like, well, Zach, that's great. But, and that's what you want.
Exactly.
Because if you can have 6 minds worrying about what might go wrong, it's better than probably you laying up late at night thinking all that's responsibility is just yours.
Yeah, and the thing that I had to do with that organization or that department was they were sales engineers, and I'm not as technical as they are. So I leveraged their skill and tied it into my leadership skills to build the culture that we had. And so I couldn't lead the department without their input. And I think that I did have to nudge them a little bit to say, okay, I don't care who your manager was before. Like, I'm here now and I actually want to hear what you're saying because I don't know. Like, you need to help me understand what's going on. So that like amplified my leadership ability. And I don't know if you experience this or see this in other cultures, but I've noticed that some leaders will either take their employees' ideas, which is something that you mentioned in the book, or they don't want them to overshadow themselves. How do you navigate that if that's one of those things as an employee? And then maybe how do you fix those leaders?
Yeah, so it was interesting. 56% of the people in our Courageous Cultures research said the reason they don't share their ideas is because somebody's going to take credit for it, which is tragic. I mean,
It's terrible.
And it's interesting because a while ago when I first started Let's Grow Leaders, I also taught in the MBA program, at an MBA program, and I taught a course called Dealing with Difficult People at Work. And part of your project, every person had to come with a project to work on a difficult person at work. Now, can you imagine? You probably can guess who was the difficult person for 99% of the people.
I'd say their manager.
Their boss, yeah, absolutely. And the number one issue people had was their boss was taking credit for their work. So it is consistent with our research that this is a fairly universal problem for a lot of people. But here's the thing. When we did that project, when we gave people the words to go talk to their manager about, most of the all but one circumstance turned around. I think there was one guy that was a narcissist that we couldn't fix.
Oh.
But everybody else, the first reaction was like, "Oh my gosh, I did not mean to do that."
Mm.
So it is you if you can approach your manager in a reasonable way, and say, "Hey, I know I'm really wanting to work on my career and my position here, and I noticed when we were in that meeting, you were using a lot of I's, like
Mm.
I did this, I did that, I did this about my idea that, by the way, I brought, so." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I did," because I think, they didn't realize it. So then you
Hmm.
ask for what you need. Can you help me make it right? The next time we go into this meeting, can I showcase the pilot we did or whatever it is that,
Mm.
and without accusing, like you just are
Yeah.
noticing and you're bringing it up. And our next book is called Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. And it
Mm.
comes out in May, again
Nice.
with HarperCollins. And we have a whole chapter in there about dealing with credit stealers and all the
Mm.
powerful phrases to think and things to
Oh,
say.
that's exciting. I'm gonna definitely get the first book because this was the Courageous Cultures was the first one that I came across. I think it was actually a Christmas gift,
Oh, neat.
so somebody was looking out for you, which
Nice.
I'm glad because I try to read books that go along with what I'm working on at the time. And with Grapevine, we're trying to solve the biggest problems for remote and hybrid organizations. And one of the biggest pillars is communication and collaboration. And so I wanted to see what Courageous Cultures was, and I'm glad that I did. But I think it's a perfect segue of what we're talking about now, going into owning the ugly, because I think that's kind of what we've been talking about a little bit. But it's another acronym. Can you break that down and explain how you help companies own the ugly in their organizations?
Yeah. So, Own the Ugly is a series of 4 courageous questions that you can ask to get people to think more broadly about a strategic initiative or where some place you need a great idea. So, say you're a sales team and revenue is not where it needs to be. Your competitors are eating your lunch. That's not good. So versus just saying, okay, everybody, we need to get to, 50 million in sales and we're at 30 million in sales, fix it,
Hmm.
which if I could have fixed it, I would have fixed it.
Yeah.
Right. So, one of the things you can do is say, let's back up for a moment because what we're doing right now isn't working.
Hmm.
So, what are you underestimating? Meaning, like, what have we not considered? Maybe we're underestimating that the customers, that our competitor's product does something that ours doesn't. Maybe we're underestimating the need to do more training for our sales force. We're
Hmm.
underestimating, we think they've got it already and they don't get it, right? Gee, what's got to go? What do we need to stop doing in order to really focus on this thing? And, so what are activities that our people are spending time on that are not adding the value that they need that, because there's a tendency, especially in fast growing tech startups, to just keep adding on initiatives.
Yep.
And people are all gung ho because they're entrepreneurs and they're excited. But after a while, that just becomes too much. And
Hmm.
so when you're adding new solutions, you've got to take off some of the activities. Then L, where are we losing? Where are we losing to the competition? Where is our performance not where it needs to be? Are our sales low in August, but then they always rally in September? Well,
Hmm.
why? Right? Like, what's different in August? And then what I really like is where are we missing the yes, which is where is there a completely different way to think about this problem? So in that case study I talk about in chapter 6, where we were missing the yes was my sales team was very focused on retail customers. And what we
Hmm.
were missing is that there was a B2B game in this. And
Yep.
that if we could get the sales force to open up their minds to say, I can sell to small business from a store, then we were
Yep.
selling 5, 10, 20 lines at a time. And it made up for the fact that consumers only wanted the iPhone because people, I know many of your listeners probably don't even remember the word BlackBerry, But back in the day, the business customers were still interested in a BlackBerry and push to talk
Yeah.
phones. And some of these, because of the security issues, they were a little bit skeptical about the newfangled iPhone, right? So, enabling your team to pivot to what are new ways of thinking. That's where you are, right? If you're Grapevine, right, you are trying to deal with all these hybrid and virtual solutions. You
Yep.
need to, where are we missing the yes? Because a lot of times people are like, well, we can't do that virtually.
Mm.
Well, is that true? Right? And I think what the last couple of years has taught us is that we can do a heck of a lot more virtually than we ever thought we could.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and just to stay on that topic for a second, because obviously I'm gonna nerd out a little bit. Like whenever we're talking about hybrid and remote solutions, I think that sometimes we're asking the wrong question. I actually did a podcast on this where whenever we see that, let's say that in offices has higher productivity, which isn't necessarily true, I ask the questions: Are are we thinking about it correctly in the sense of the way that we measure the office, we've had tons of years, decades, centuries to be able to know the trends, the type of structure that we need. Is the question that hybrid or remote isn't as productive as in the office, or is it that we don't have the right infrastructure, that we're not using the
Mhm.
tools like Courageous Culture offers? Those are the things that I think we need to start thinking about rather than is this more productive? Is it not? But like you said, can we do this virtually? If not, why? And is that a real why? You go down like the 5 whys
Yeah.
approach and all that, and then
Yeah.
you actually come to the truth. I had Tammy Bielen from Workplace List on before your episode, and she helps hybrid and remote organizations adopt the virtual aspect in their companies, and she kind of talked about that where are like when she kind of breaks it down into asynchronous work and synchronous work, and
Mhm.
she has the companies ask themselves what are the things that we need to do synchronously versus asynchronously, and if it is synchronously, why? If it's just because we've done this for as long as we've existed, that's not a good answer you know so I'll stop nerding
Yeah,
out
one of
there.
the things that drives people crazy is when you have a mandate of bring everybody back to work
Ugh,
and no reason. And
yeah.
everybody is still sitting in their cubes on Zoom when and they're not coming together. And I can't tell you how many times I hear that. So if you
Mm,
are, when you're going to have occasions to bring people together, make sure that people are driving to work going, I'm excited to go to work today because I know that my commute time will be well spent. You
yes.
know.
Yeah. Because whenever the pandemic happened, a lot of people started assessing what matters the most to me. Because, like, we've never experienced as a whole at the same time of the amount of loss of life where we're constantly thinking about death. And I know this is kind of getting morbid, but I think about death a lot because it motivates me to think about what I should be doing every single day. and I,
Right.
and I, and I think that like the pandemic made us think that way, and that translates into the corporate world, into the culture. Like, what type of culture do I want to work for? Does it allow me to be flexible, have autonomy, that type of stuff? I don't know if you want to speak to that too, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, and people want to be spending their time on something that is important. And
Yes.
so that you need to help people see the meaning in the work that you're doing. And it's interesting. We do a very simple exercise. We call it our movie trailer exercise, and we'll do this in our in our training, our virtual training, and our in person training, and our keynotes. And it's to make a movie trailer about your team's work or your own work.
Hmm.
And it's fun. It's high energy, but people, those trailers that they come up with, I mean, they're hysterical, but they're poignant. They're
Mm.
really poignant. And it's like, why does what I do really, really matter? And, I think it's easy when we're just dealing with a fire hose of work every day
Yeah.
to just get away from that. And that, when I see people quiet quitting or in our county right now, we are having a terrible school bus driver shortage.
Mm.
Terrible. And it's just my kid's a senior. He's got a clunker of a car that he's driving, so we don't have I don't have to worry about it. But I keep worrying, like I watch, and I ran into this lady at the post office, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, my 5-year-old has been sitting at school for 2 hours, and I have to, I'm not off work yet, and I can't go get
Oh.
her." And what, so that to me is, there's some systemic things about how they're paying people and all that.
Mm.
School bus driver job is a really important job about creating, a safe and happy way and for kids to get to school, little
Yeah.
guys, right? And so, I'm thinking, I hope that part of the solution is, yes, let's pay them fair wages and let's do that. But what is causing people to wake up in the morning and say, "Nah, I quit
Mm.
this job," right?
Yeah. And I think maybe this is a different podcast, but I think we see that transcend through the entire educational system. I have friends who are teachers and they're thinking about getting out of teaching. I've actually had one who, instead of being a teacher, and she received accolades and all this type of stuff, so she was rewarded, but the amount of stuff you're talking about, the fire hose, it just kept coming at her. And she also had a health issue, and she chose to go into full-on entrepreneurship, knowing that entrepreneurship is a lot, well, I won't say a lot harder because it's tough to manage kids and all that kind of stuff too, but these people are taking matters into their own hands. I've read, I can't remember the exact statistic, but there's like three top reasons why people become entrepreneurs, and one of them is they get tired of not being able to do things on their own, meaning like their manager is like a micromanager, or they're just not, they feel confined. And like you said, they're not working towards a purpose anymore, you know? So,
Zach, we
yeah.
talk about micromanagers in our new book too. So
Oh, that's so funny, not funny. The one of the reasons that I started Grapevine is because I had a micromanager or a bully boss, and the overall mission of Grapevine is to make work better for everyone and make work more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling. So, like, I'm 100% going to get that book because I never want to be a micromanager. I don't think that that helps anybody at all. The only person that it might help is the micromanager feel like they're powerful for that split second.
Mhm.
But I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier about like leaders who aren't necessarily self-aware. Sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes they're narcissist. Um, but it's funny to think that only because I didn't say anything, they continue to act like this.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna get that book. But so we don't run out of time, I want to switch to galvanizing the genius to kind of bring it all together. So I know like towards the end of the book, that's where y'all bring it full circle. And you mentioned three areas that causes troubles for organizations. Can you talk about those three areas and how you help overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think, when we think about galvanize the genius, what we're really talking about is how do you scale? How do you scale best practices? How do you scale an idea?
Mm,
And a lot of times when people will get in trouble with scaling an idea, one of the things that they'll do is they say, "All right, well, this idea worked great in New York City,
yeah.
great in New York City. Everybody should do it immediately, 100% right now. Let's go. From now on, everybody's going to talk to our customers this way."
Mm,
Well, the way people talk in New York, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, is not going to work in Cedar Bluff, Virginia.
true.
Right? So in Cedar Bluff, Virginia, it's a very small town. There's a way you better drink some sweet tea before you ask anybody to do anything. And if you're from Cedar Bluff, Virginia, though, you're probably going to just like chat and say, "Yeah, that's actually how we do things around here." So the thing is, to galvanize the genius, you need to practice the principle within the thing. So, all right, so if what we need to do, if what's actually working here is we're creating empathy in the first 40 seconds of the interaction, well, how's that going to work in New York City? And how's that going to work in, Cedar Bluff, Virginia? And then then you go back to the people and you say, how are you, like, this is what we need to accomplish. What are your ideas to practice that principle? So, that is one of the big mistakes, I think. And then another one is assuming people got it,
Mm.
right? So I've communicated, and we talked about this earlier. I've communicated to you, and so I'm assuming that you're ready to go. And I haven't checked back for understanding to make sure that people get it. And so
Yeah.
galvanizing the genius is really all about how do you close that feedback loop. So it's know, show, and flow, right? So do
Hmm.
people know what's happening? Have you shown them what is going on? And then how are you cascading it, flowing it, and making sure you're pulling back through?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a big part that a lot of companies miss. I know, like, we were talking about speaking up or fear of speaking up, and there was a leadership meeting that I had. We got everybody together, ironically, in New York, and we it was the leadership team, and we were talking about updating our product vision and creating a vision for the company in the net for like what we want to accomplish in the next 3 years. And so we went through this whole workshop. We did it. We had a great time. We connected, we communicated, and then we go back and then we have a Zoom meeting the following week. And one of the things that I brought up to the CTO and the customer success officer, I forget that. I think it was CCSO. There's so many C's. Anyway, I brought it up to them. I said, I think that we should really take these three elements that we decided to focus on in our product vision and create definitions for them, because it could mean different things to different people. And we want to make sure, speaking
Mhm.
of clarity, we want to make sure that they understand. And their response to me, and they didn't mean it in any bad way. They just said, well, Zach, I think people are smart enough that they understand. And that, like, didn't sit well with me,
Yep.
but I didn't know how much I could push back because I was probably one of the least experienced people in the room. So I don't know. You want to speak on
Yeah.
that?
So
And
this is funny because David's my husband and business
Mhm.
partner and co-author, and we actually met writing Winning Well, our first book.
Mm.
And so at that point when we were writing it, we weren't in a relationship other than it's something professional. So we're
Mhm.
having these very professional arguments about things. And one was he says, all right, so we have for the when we're talking about clarity, we have to put check for understanding in there. And I'm like, what is check for understanding? He said, check for understanding is that when you say something, then you don't say, are there any questions? You
Mhm.
say, can you tell, I want to make sure I've been perfectly clear. What did you hear me say?
Mm.
Right. But, or, just can you, I just want to make sure my communication, can you just tell me the first three things we're going to do? Or I want to just check for understanding, do you get why we're doing this? Can you tell me what it is that why this is so critical? Or can
Mhm.
you tell me how we're going to communicate this to our customers? Because I gave you three ideas. How are you going to communicate it to the customers? Right. And I'm like, no way. That is so condescending. That is so basic. Nobody's going to buy a leadership book that says check for understanding. Now, I will tell you, it's 10 years later. We have been communicating all over the world at very high levels of the business a lot of the time. I'm talking like
Mhm.
CEO, COO, CMO. People, they'll do a 6-month course with us, all kinds of sophisticated things.
Mhm.
And then at the end, we're like, what's the most important thing you got out of this course? To check for understanding.
Yeah, it's
They're like,
huge.
it changed my life. And and so I think we all, it's human nature. We assume
Mhm.
that people get it. And that's to slow down. And when you say, are there any questions? Does anybody have any people, there's silence. They may think they
Mhm.
got it, but they didn't get it.
Yep.
They may be embarrassed to tell you that they didn't get it. They may think it's a bad idea, but are afraid to speak up. But if you don't check in for understanding, you don't know what that silence means.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. I was thinking back as you were speaking. When is the last time that I've had a leader ask me, like, do you understand, or can you repeat back to like what you said to me or what I said to you? And there would be, like, that's an open invitation to say, well, here's what I heard, and then the leader to be able to say it without being condescending.
Right.
And yeah, that's it's so crazy how I think culture really comes from a lot of small actions that make the bigger whole. And I don't know if maybe leaders just get too busy or they think that it's not important. I don't know. Have you experienced, or what is your experience with somebody saying, well, culture is great, but we got to make money?
Right, right. And so, our favorite definition of culture comes from Seth Godin, who, a marketing guru, thought
Mm-hmm.
leader. And he says culture is simply people like us do things like this.
Mm.
And that, how people like us do at your job is everything. And
Yeah.
so, you could say we treat, customer service as our most important priority.
Mm-hmm.
But if people like us tell the customer no all the time without, like, nope, you can't, nope, not going to go the extra mile, nope, and aren't listening to the customers, aren't paying attention to what the customer's needs really are, you're going to go out of business.
Mm.
So to say, and so I think the problem is that it's what are you working on? Are you working, you're not going to fix your culture by doing, spending a lot of time in, laser tag rooms and throwing paintball at each other. That you may get to know one another, and
Yeah.
connection is an important part of culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you want real collaboration, connection, we have 4 C's that we're talking about in our new book. And one is connection. Are we connected as human beings? But also clarity. Do we have a shared understanding of success, right? All the way down to a habit level.
Mm-hmm.
Curiosity, are we showing up, right?
Yeah.
Saying, are we genuinely interested in other people's perspectives of how we do this? And commitment, do we have a clear agreement of how we're moving forward? And so, to say we have culture, and I think that's like, oh, we have a fun culture.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's an element of your culture about how you're connecting. But your culture also needs to be, do we have a culture of accountability where people do what they say they're going to do? Do we have a culture where it is safe to share ideas? That's the kind of stuff that's going to impact your business. And
Mm.
so what I hate is like, oh, well, we have a culture committee. The culture, there so many times the culture committee, I would love it if a culture committee was doing real work on
Yeah.
advising. But usually the culture committee is trying to decide whether we're going to have international potluck, for Thanksgiving so that it's more inclusive, which is fine, but it's not
Yeah.
going to impact your bottom line. It's going to help the
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah, it's one element that can connect
Yeah.
people, but like you said, starting with the why, like why are we trying to build this culture? What culture do we want to build? And then tying those things. I always look at it as the core values should drive the behaviors in the organization, and those behaviors end up becoming the culture. And so like if you don't take the time to be intentional about your culture, it's going to create itself, and it might not be the one that you want.
Right. Right.
Okay, so I think that's a good time to make the mood a little bit light and go to the lightning round
Okay.
as we end this podcast episode. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Okay, they're just fun things. They're kind of focused on remote work. So, first question, coffee or tea for the early morning meetings?
Coffee.
Yes, exactly. Favorite remote work playlist or music genre?
Oh, I cannot listen to music at all while I work.
Really?
And it is, I don't know. I am a singer.
Hmm.
I am fairly musical, and I think that it's when I hear music, it just like my brain can only tap into that music, and I can't think it off.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I can't work in a coffee shop with anywhere that there's music. David and I can't work in the same room because he loves to have music. So that's the music thing. But we do start every one of our remote programs with a thematic song
Hmm.
that goes with whatever we're going to talk about.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So that's kind
That's
of
that's a way to create that creativity and innovation for each. Like it makes each new thing new.
and people come and they're like, I wonder what they're going to play today, And so as
Yeah.
people are joining, and then like we're chatting along, and the music is playing, it creates kind of happy atmosphere.
Yeah. That's cool. I might have to think because so I know this is funny, but I rap and I've been rapping since 20 or for 20 years. And so like I need to figure out a way to incorporate that
Oh,
into
that'd be
my
fun.
work.
Yeah.
Okay. Most creative location you've worked from remotely,
Oh.
which might be tough because you said it's hard to the noises.
Well, I will tell you that my favorite place is we have a little place in Colorado, in Frisco, Colorado, which is near Breckenridge.
Hmm.
And we wrote most of Courageous Cultures one summer, and I did it outside by the river that was going
Oh,
through. And it was so wonderful and amazing. And I would start in the morning, I'd take my coffee and then I'd work and then I'd go get lunch and then I'd come back and I would have my caramel popcorn, which is my writing snack of choice. And yeah, so that's my favorite place. And recently we've been spending a good bit of time in Switzerland
hmm.
because of our work with Nestle, and they've
Yeah,
got
that's
some
right.
beautiful venues for outside thinking too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like being outside, but I still haven't figured out how to get my laptop screen to not be so dark outside.
Yeah, David can't do it. It's funny. He doesn't like it. I like it. So,
That's funny. Okay, one essential tool or app for remote productivity.
mm, well, besides for Zoom,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, it's we use. It's interesting. I'm finding that it's just Google Sheets, and I've really
Hmm.
resisted Google Sheets quite a bit
Hmm.
because I like my system in Dropbox. But I am finding with the more I'm collaborating with people like my press people who are, finding interviews for us, and it's just to be able to all be in the same document, even at the same time, and not have to worry about version control.
Yeah, no, that's a big thing, and that's one of the things that we're trying to solve for Grapevine. Not necessarily the creating of the documents; we'll have integrations with those aspects, but the collaboration piece and because whenever I would search SharePoint or Google Drive, you wouldn't have the most updated version. And so now they're making it more collaborative, so it makes it a little bit easier. But anything on Grapevine, you'll be able to have that version control.
Nice.
Um, but this is not about Grapevine.
Version control. Version control is everything.
It is, yeah, because it's the alignment, the communication piece. Because a lot of people don't talk about, oh, well, I created this new one. They just forget about it, or like you said, they think that other people will just know, which is not how it works, especially in a remote environment.
Yeah, yeah. No, I spend time. I have a lot of friends who run training companies too, right? So we mastermind and do different things. And one of the biggest problems I hear is so if you have a lot of trainers, somebody will make an improvement to a
Mm,
training program, but they don't update it in the master. And so everybody else is still facilitating the old thing. And they don't realize
yeah,
that, like Linda in Kansas has just done something spectacular that she should have saved back up. And so in remote work, you really need to like have a process for that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and that's why I love the cloud aspect because everybody can communicate, be on the same level. Okay, how do you combat Zoom fatigue?
Uh, well, in our programs, I would say the way we combat Zoom fatigue is consistently changing up the medium of what we're doing. So, you'll go in and, start high level with the music, and then we have some interactions, and they'll say, put your fingers on the keyboard, everybody chat in their answer to this question. Okay, now we're going to go into breakout rooms. And in breakout
Mhm.
rooms, you're going to do this assignment, then we're going to read out like this. Okay, so now we're going to use this, this tool, and so that it's a constant change of state for people.
Mhm.
Because it's just a lot if you have meeting after meeting after meeting. And I really want them to come to our virtual training and say, oh, this feels radically different than the rest of my day.
Yeah. No, that's a good call out. And I think a lot of people don't use that as much as they should because you get into like an hour long Zoom meeting and it's like by the end of it you're checked out or you're doing something else on your other screen and all that. So that's a good answer. Name one unexpected benefit of remote work
Hmm.
for you.
Unexpected benefit of remote work. Well, I don't know if it was unexpected, but what I really love is that I'm around a lot more for my son.
Mm,
And so that has been nice. I'm still now I'm back to traveling a lot more, but during
hmm
the pandemic, it was a pivotal time. He's done high school, and we were
Yeah.
all here all day together. And I think we're a lot closer because of that, because we're around so much, and had lunch together, and all that.
That's a big thing. That's a big push for why I like remote and hybrid, and plus like the mental health aspect of it too, and gaining control of your life again, is the way
Hmm.
that I think about it.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite from the lightning rounds. What is your remote work pet peeve? What drives you crazy?
I really hate it when it's a meeting that we should have the cameras on, and we've agreed that we're going to have the cameras on, and people don't put their cameras on.
Yeah.
And I think, and we talk about this in our new book too, but there's, you've got to have clear expectations for these meetings. And so a lot of times, you'll be working with companies and there's just not expectations about this is what we do around here. So some
hmm
people expect this, some people expect that, but when people don't have their cameras on and others do, then what are they doing? Are they multitasking?
Yeah.
What is happening? And I'm not saying you always need to have them on, but if we've agreed that we are,
hmm
then that's an expectation violation if we're not.
Yeah. No, that's a big thing. And I can't remember the stats or where I heard this, but just psychologically speaking, especially for salespeople, like even if that person that they're talking to doesn't have their camera on, they should have their camera on because they can connect to you better than just seeing a blank screen with your name on it. So there's a lot of benefits of those. But yeah, setting that expectation before so people know, okay, I need to come to this and not have like crazy hair going on and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Okay. This will be the last one because I've taken up too much of your time. Um, describe your dream virtual team building activity.
It would probably have to be something about making up songs.
Yep.
I think that I'm a big one to all right, well, let's put our strategic initiative into a song, and I'd probably put people into breakout rooms and have them make up a song around the strategic priorities and come back and sing it in some kind of clever way.
Oh, I like that. I like
What's yours,
it's
Zach?
see, this is tough. It would probably be something around music too. Probably rap, but like I think a Hamilton themed. But see, then everybody has to watch Hamilton, so maybe. But then I could talk to those people about Hamilton. So, but yeah, I think it would have to be something around like a Hamilton themed approach to maybe putting our strategy together and
Nice,
then transcending it down.
fun.
So, but we're definitely going to have some fun team building stuff once we get to that level at Grapevine. So stay tuned. I'll keep you updated.
All right, sounds good.
But that's it. You passed the lightning round. Thanks so much for being here. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about, or you want to direct people where they can find you?
Yeah, no, I would love to connect. I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Karin with an I, which I'm grateful for these days with the name Karin. So Karin Hurt, and the book is Courageous Cultures. And then our website is Let's Grow Leaders. You can download free sample chapters to all the books that we've talked about if you just go to books. So Winning Well, Courageous Cultures, and there's information about powerful phrases coming out there too.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I know that the listeners are going to gain a lot from what you were able to deliver to us, and maybe down the road we'll get you back on for the new book.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks. My pleasure.